All right, everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of Let's Talk Leadership, presented by the 100 Black Men of Atlanta. For those that don't know, the 100 is a 34-year-old organization that focuses on mentoring and uplifting our community. Our primary programs are Product Success, where we provide tuition assistance to deserving young students. And in 2019, we awarded $184,000 in scholarships to young people. We have our Robotics Alliance, where we partner with Dr. Lonnie Johnson, the inventor of the Super Soaker, to teach kids about STEM. And we have hundreds of kids that learn how to build robots in middle school and high school, and thousands of kids that come through the center and just get exposed to STEM. And we do a lot of work over at Best Academy High School with character development, life skills training, and a variety of other programs. We have our Collegiate 100, which are college students, and we have our Emerging 100, which are young professionals. And today we're bringing you our Let's Talk Leadership session, which is an opportunity to provide some guidance, some instruction, some advice from titans of the community, the business community, philanthropic community, and other communities. And today we have a treat for you. We have my friend, Kourtney Gibson. I will give you an introduction of Kourtney. Kourtney is the president of Loop Capital Markets. She oversees all brand building efforts at the firm, including the cultivation and enhancement of strategic client relationships across the firm's various business lines. In addition, Ms. Gibson identifies and pursues firm-wide opportunities for growth and operational improvement. Ms. Gibson serves on Loop Capital's management and fairness and valuation committees. Ms. Gibson started with Loop Capital as an intern in 1997, the firm's founding year. Over more than 20 years, Ms. Gibson has worked across multiple functions at Loop Capital, including strategy, investment banking, sales, and trading. In 2015, after a decade of running the firm's equity division, she became responsible for heading the firm's taxable fixed income division. Ms. Gibson was then named president in 2016. She currently serves on the boards of Lululemon Athletica, Inc. and Market Access Holdings, Inc. She's a member of the Economic Club of Chicago and the Treasury Management Practices Group, sponsored by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. In addition, Ms. Gibson sits on the board of trustees at the University of Miami, the U, where she serves on the executive committee and investment committee, and Viterbo University, where she serves on the finance committee. Her community outreach includes her role as a board member of the, DIBIA? Dream Foundation, and chairman of the board of the Chicago Scholars Foundation. She holds Series 7, 57, 24, and 63 FINRA registrations, and you can see her regularly on CNBC as a contributor, providing insight, analysis, and outlook on the markets. Ms. Gibson received her MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern and a BBA from the University of Miami. Most importantly, she is the mother of 3 lovely daughters and the caretaker of another big baby who's a friend of mine and works with me at DLA Piper. And he's also a member of the Emerging 100, Aubrey. And it is a treat to have you here today. We look forward to this conversation. So let's talk a little leadership.
Sounds good.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your road to your current professional position and a little bit about your firm for those that don't know about Loop Capital.
Sure. Well, Kevin, which I never really call you, but I'm going to call you Kevin today. Thank you so much for having me. This is just an awesome organization and an awesome time to just be having discussions with your constituents, which is a fantastic opportunity. So thank you. So my career path, you kind of walked through already for me, right? So started out in finance as an intern and subsequently, went off to college, still interned. I like to work, hard work yields results, generally speaking. I always tell people, I say, even if I'm not the smartest one in the room, I always have the ability to outwork you. So if I'm up in the room with Beyonce, we'll probably just be going back and forth in different areas on outworking. But hard work gets you a lot of places. But started out in finance, but I was going to be a doctor. Actually, I wanted to be a bilingual pediatrician my whole life, and even all the way through, almost graduated and decided to apply to medical school, but decided not to do that and continue to pursue my career in finance. So fast forward to where we are today, you kind of know what that looks like at this point. I also did do a stint at Northwestern University where I did the executive MBA program to just, again, continue to further grow, learn. The only way you get to be great is by training, which is actually what DIBIA stands for, Kevin, because you were like, what does that stand for? What does that sound? It's to train to be great. It's from a Western African dialect. It means to train to be great. And so a friend of mine started that organization, which I have the privilege to serve on the board of, where they do STEM training. I know they're working with Best Academy, looking to expand here in Atlanta even further, but that's something to live by from our ancestors. For those of us who have roots in Western Africa, to train to be great is critical.
So tell us a little bit. So not just a pediatrician, but a bilingual pediatrician. So how did you go from that path to where you ended up? Because I know a lot of our college students, they're like, okay, I don't know what I want to do, when they bounce around the different majors, and they don't know they have no clue where they're ultimately going to end up, and that's okay. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up going from medicine to where you are now.
Look, I wish I could tell you something incredibly profound and that I just, I woke up and fell in love with numbers. That's not the story. Sometimes they tell you can follow your passion, or, people always talk about following your passion and that's what'll be great and yada, yada. Well, I don't know if I would have been that great of a doctor. Honestly, I probably would have wanted to take every sick child home with me and take care of them. And if doctors don't do that. There are some doctors that are totally empathetic, but I don't know if Aubrey, my husband, would want me to come home every day with this new baby that happens to be sick that I just want to take care of. But I found out I actually was good at finance and I was good at sales. And so when I had the opportunity to intern at Loop, I didn't even know what an investment bank was, which isn't abnormal for nowadays people kind of know what investment banks are just because of social media and the internet. And obviously from 2008, 2009, investment bankers were kind of demonized at the time. But back when in the late 90s, I didn't know what it was. And so, I started at this investment banking firm and I did everything from help to pick out the first copy machine, to pick up coffee, to create the first presentation decks, because I was the only one who knew how to work PowerPoint. And so as I was getting involved in the business and having an opportunity to see how business was getting done, I kind of liked it. And so again, I said I continued my schooling while I was at Miami, because I tested into certain coursework, and I'm sure some of the students have taken kind of IB or AP courses in high school, and you get these credits for college. Well, I got more credits in the business school than I did kind of going into a general kind of liberal arts background. And so I'm like, wait a minute, I can graduate in probably under 4 years if I just go this business path. That was really what it boiled down to, because I knew when I came out of school, if I may not have known what I was going to do, which I was potentially going down a consulting path. I still, like I said, had that glimmer of wanting to become a doctor. I had the finance background piece. I had an offer at IBM, General Mills, and sales. So I wanted to make sure I had options when I came out. But the only way you do that is if A, you study really hard, B, you finish with really good grades, and then you can kind of write your ticket where you want to go. And so I was focused on kind of coming out and making sure I had a job. And that was going to be critical. I had an internship at Morgan Stanley in New York, and that was a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. It was unfortunate that at the time I was only one of 27 Black people in an entire fixed income analyst class. I know they've gotten better at that as we've moved forward, and I've helped to introduce a number of young people to our industry. But back then I was the only one. And, we're not that far off from that today, but I know all of the investment banks, and obviously ours as well, are focused on making sure that people of color, and in particular Black folks, are aware of this business and the opportunities that are in it. Behind athletes and entertainers, finance is the most highest, the highest paying career profession out there. And I know Gooch, because you advise them on the legal side of things. But when you talk about these private equity transactions and venture capital transactions and investment banking more broadly, there's a lot of opportunities in finance. And without exposure, our kids don't even know it exists. So again, for me, someone who didn't know that it existed, had an opportunity early on in an internship in Chicago, then at Morgan Stanley, I realized I kind of like this finance thing, and I'm pretty good at sales. So what about going down this banking path? And that's what led to the next 20 years of my career.
So give a 30,000-foot description of what it is your firm does, and then sort of what's your day-to-day? What does your day-to-day look like?
You did ask me that, didn't you? So Loop Capital is an investment bank and brokerage firm that focuses in a few areas. So if I kind of distill, what does that all mean, right? So we cover clients. We cover corporate clients. We cover public clients. We cover asset managers. So when we think about the city of Atlanta, and the city of Atlanta needs to let's say build new roads, or redo the water sewage system, or they need to raise capital, right? What our firm does is we say, okay, city of Atlanta, we can help you raise this $1 billion that you need to redo the roads. We're going to help you to raise that money from investors. We then go out to the BlackRocks, T. Rowe Prices, et cetera, and we say, hey, city of Atlanta needs to raise capital for new roads. The investors say, I would love to lend them that money, and we'll put those bonds in the portfolio. And that's what we do. So we help them on the front end, where we help them to the city of Atlanta to issue debt. And then we put those bonds in the portfolios of asset managers. And then on the back end, we trade those bonds. So that's one thing we do on the bond side. On the stock side, we work with, the likes of, again, the BlackRocks, T. Rowe's, the Ariel Investments, which happens to be also African-American owned. We work with them when they decide they want to buy and sell stock out of their portfolios that they're managing. We trade that for them. We advise corporations when, Facebook were to buy Instagram. Let's just work with me on this. They might have hired our firm. They didn't. We would have loved them to, but they might have hired our firm to advise them on those acquisitions. Or when private equity firms decide they want to go and buy a particular company and help grow and build it and then sell it in an IPO, which many folks have probably heard about, we help them do that too. So we work all with institutions right now, though we are launching a wealth management platform for high net worth clients. Right now, though, like I said, we work with corporations, municipalities, governments, and then we work with institutional asset managers to service them on a global basis.
So what are some of the larger deals that you've worked on? Because people can definitely relate to numbers. So what are some of the larger deals that you've worked on or helped out on?
Oh gosh, so we've done a number of transactions. So in our corporate investment banking group, we've been on deals and led deals for the likes of right here, and I'll just kind of mention Georgia. So from the Georgia Powers or the SoCal Edisons, or Southern Company right here in Atlanta, to Coca-Cola, UPS. So more recently, we actually worked on a deal with Allstate, which was the first time that a minority-owned firm that they've actually ever done a deal where it was all minority investment banks. We happen to be the largest minority or woman-owned investment bank in the country, and one of the largest privately held investment banking firms. But this was a huge deal because not only did the CEO of Allstate, Tom Wilson, say, we're going to do an all minority syndicate, which is basically, Black, brown, veterans, doing this transaction, raising these assets for Allstate. But I'm also going to pick up the phone and call my friends. And this is what you want to have happen, right? So whether it's you as an individual or a company or your business, you want people to refer you. You want them to say nice things. You want them to encourage the cycle, because that's the only way you get more opportunities. So not only did Tom Wilson say that Allstate, this publicly traded insurance company, is going to have a Black firm be lead left, Loop Capital, on this $1 billion+ transaction, but I'm also going to encourage my friends to do the same thing, my colleagues, my competitors, my vendors to do the same thing. So he really put out a challenge to the marketplace to say, hey, this can be done. There are qualified firms that can lead big transactions, and they should be in the driver's seat to be able to do so. So it was an awesome opportunity for us just a couple of weeks ago with Allstate, and we're looking forward to kind of seeing that pipeline continue, because what historically has happened, unfortunately, is they'll include, certain corporations think they're doing the right thing, which you want to have inclusion and have folks included on these deals that are diverse, but they'll be at this small economics. Like, they couldn't buy that jacket you're wearing, Gooch. They pay us enough fees and can't even buy you that jacket. Instead of that, it's like, well, if you're paying out $100 million in fees to Wall Street, why can't Luke, why can't a Siebert, why can't some of these other firms participate on these transactions in a meaningful way? City of Atlanta, under the prior mayor's tenure, as well as Mayor Lance Bonham's tenure, they've also allowed minority women-owned firms to partner with them and provide value and make money in leading transactions, which is incredibly important.
Okay. So day to day, what's sort of your role with the company? What do you do in the midst of all of this that's happening?
Whatever needs to get done. But and that's kind of what's cool about it. Like I said, I almost went into consulting, but I think part of the reason for that was my own, looking back 2020, it's my desire to solve problems. We have a structure, we have great infrastructure, we have incredibly talented people at our organization that really help to grow our business. So my job is to optimize, to help pick up slack around the edges, to drive new business. So, I think about today, my day started with, okay, aside from the little girls and my one big baby that's at home, it starts with kind of meeting with my chief legal and compliance team, figuring out, okay, what are our legal exposures? What compliance exposure do we have? How are we managing that? What systems should we be putting in place as we look at 2021 and our strategic planning season? So I'm focused on that piece from an internal organization perspective. I got to then sprinkle in a little bit of fun, and we're doing our virtual holiday party, and we're getting ready to deliver out wine to our employees. And so what do I say to my team that's kind of said, hey, we need this allocation for the budgeting for this? I'm like, okay, great. Are there any Black-owned businesses that we can hire to get this wine delivered? And they're like, oh, we should be thinking about that. I'm like, yes, we should be thinking about that. So then they're going back to the drawing board and figuring that out. Then I have a conversation with one of the senators in the state of Illinois, because there's pension hearings going on later this week around the diversity of the financial services community. So we have to help to set the stage for opening the doors for firms that look like ours, and others, to say, give us opportunities, hire people that look like us. We can do the job, give us an opportunity. So helping to make sure that those folks are ready and prepared for those hearings. Then I'm looking at, okay, what does our trade blotter look like? We trade with some of the largest asset managers on the planet, like the BlackRocks, as I mentioned, of the world, and what are we doing with them? Are there opportunities to do more? Where should we be planning for 2021? So what's cool about business in general, and kind of from the seat in which I'm humbled to be able to sit, is I have an opportunity to not only impact the day-to-day of our internal infrastructure of our business, but also the community more broadly. And I think when we were on the phone, what was I doing? I think I was reading a letter that has to go into the annual report for one of the nonprofits that I chair. So, there's just a lot of opportunity to be impactful in the community, as well as kind of push day in and day out to make sure that our business is thriving and preparing for the next stages of 2021.
Three Parks Wine, Glenwood Park, they can help you. So the finance industry and space can be intimidating for a lot of African Americans. What was it in particular that helped you sort of get over that sort of that the scariness of, oh, this is complicated and it's too hard to get into? Like, what was it that made you push through that to go into this space? Was it exposure, or did mentors play a role, or what made you feel comfortable going into this space?
I'll talk a little bit about that. But it's always interesting. And I think every single day, like, people kind of laugh sometimes when I say, for every meeting that I go into, I prepare. Like I want to read the bios. I want to know about the company. And I've done thousands of meetings, right? But it's that one time that you're somewhere and you're not prepared that you get caught with your pants down, right? And you don't
Mhm.
do that, right? So I try to be as prepared as I can be when I'm attempting to partner with clients, because it's important. Or whether I'm on the phone with my boss or someone else that I'm supposed to be meeting with. So preparation is key and critical. But I think when I first started, being young, you don't know what you have to be fearful of. And so looking back at some of the things that I probably should have been fearful of that I wasn't, it was just because I didn't know to be scared. And my mom, who's just I if I could be half the woman she is, I would be in pretty good shape when this is all said and done. But she pretty much has always told me my whole life, you can be anything you want to be if you put your mind to it. And that's what I tell our young people. And within investment banking, there are a lot of careers, right? It's not just being a banker. It's not just being a trader. You can run a hedge fund. You can run a private equity fund. You could be in the legal department. You could be in compliance. You could be a human resources director, right? So there are a lot of opportunities within this field of finance. You could be running their marketing and branding department, the same way that you have to market for Coca-Cola. Morgan Stanley has a marketing department, right? So there are a lot of opportunities within investment banking. And, I think finding a company, if that's what you want to do, right? You can start your own firm, but we can talk a little bit about my thoughts around that, because I do believe in entrepreneurial spirit and being an entrepreneur, but as much experience and exposure that you can learn from being within a big company or learning from the structure that you can get, I think is worthwhile. But if you're going wherever you're going to, wherever your career path takes you, it's making sure that it aligns with things that you believe in, and that align with, again, like I said, your beliefs and your skill set. And I think you had asked me about mentors.
Mhm.
So mentors are interesting to me, Kevin, because I think you need mentors and you need sponsors. And anyone who has ever met me or talked to me knows when I say that there's a distinction. Mentors help to lead you, guide you. They give you those tips on, not wearing a brown suit to the job interview with a pink shirt underneath, right? Potentially, unless you're in like some fashion thing that's the thing now. But they give you that guidance that they tell you what to do that other folks aren't going to tell you, right? Which is important. A sponsor, on the other hand, is someone who, when you're not in the room, they're speaking on your behalf. They're representing for you, right? They're making sure that they're positioning you for success without you even being there. You have to have both. I've been fortunate enough to have some incredible mentors. I think about my CEO, and I use this as an example all the time, where when you go into a room, what you look like, how you're positioned, the things that come out of your mouth, whether or not you're using obscenities in a business meeting. It might be appropriate in some settings, but you don't want to be the guy that drops the F-bomb in the meeting, and then the client's on the other end of the table like, did he really say that? Right. So it's those kind of cues that you pick up on that only really a mentor can help to position you for, and guide you. Or if you're thinking about a new job or new career path, that mentor will help you think through that process, while that sponsor will pick up the phone at that company and say, you got an opportunity, this is your guy or girl to be in that seat for you. So I think, we need both and multiples of both to be successful.
I love one of your earlier points where you talked about your preparation as a way to overcome fear. And like one of the pieces of advice that I always give young people is to do your best to always know your audience.
Yeah.
Because if you know your audience, then you can sort of tailor your responses and your behavior to give them what they need while remaining your authentic self. But it takes that diligence, that preparation to make sure you understand what people are looking for. So, at the end of the day, if you can give them what they need and get what you need, that's a win-win for everybody. You can only do that if you know what they need and know who your audience is.
Mhm.
And so I always think that's great advice for young people.
Here's a quote for you. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so you can actually listen first. People will tell you what they want you to know if you let them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you listen first, you can probably keep from having to put your foot in your mouth sometimes. And so I thought you articulated it really, really well, Kevin. I mean, be prepared. And then when you're in the room, listen,
Mm-hmm.
use it to your advantage. Use it to your advantage.
And then I love the spirit of sort of breaking barriers. Like I oftentimes tell young people, don't allow someone else's limitations to be a limit on you, right? And so
Mhm.
for me, as a young person coming up through law school, I saw a lot of litigation, a lot of litigators on TV, the Perry Masons and others that were in the courtroom. I didn't see a lot of corporate lawyers. And so for me, I'm a little crazy. And so I wanted to do what I didn't know anything about. And so that was how I ended up doing transactional stuff, is because everybody wanted to be litigators. I wanted to do what was against the grain. And so
Yeah.
like just find whatever it takes to allow you to be you, and like don't be afraid and boxed in by other people. And if it's the finance sector, then go into it and just go into it full bore and bring all your talent and resources and learn it. And it's not rocket science. It just takes time and work to get up to speed on it. And don't be afraid to do that. And I think you sort of embody that spirit.
Yeah, no, that you hit it right on the head. You hit it right on the head. I mean, you have to lean into where you're weak. Otherwise, you'll always stay weak,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't lean into it. Now, as much as so we talked about this whole going down your passion path versus kind of what you're good at. I love music. I didn't get my mother's voice, and I can't rap or write like Jay-Z. And so I will spend my time doing that in my spare time, in my philanthropy. I'll think about how I can do that to relax and unwind. God gave me different gifts, and it's up to you to really exploit those gifts and use them for the benefit of other people. Now, if you don't use those gifts, if you know how to crunch numbers, if you have a photogenic memory, or if you're good at focusing, use that to your strength, regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of what you're doing, right? And where you aren't as strong, you can learn to be good at certain things with the right training and preparation.
You mentioned earlier about mentors and sponsors. What is it that you have done in those relationships to sort of get the most out of those relationships, right? We hear a lot of people talk about having mentors, having sponsors, and then sometimes they don't really know how to utilize that relationship and how to maximize the return on that relationship. So in your experience, what have you done to make sure that those relationships work sort of for you and for both parties?
I'm going to start with I know I am not worthy of what I've received. And people always say, Kourtney, why do you say that? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't deserve all the good there's nothing I've done really that um, that I could say is, oh, well, I deserved that, right? Um, and so with that kind of humility on the back end, I think if you think about a mentorship relationship or sponsorship relationship where someone has said, I'm willing to invest in you, the greatest return that you can give to them is investing in yourself, right? Don't take that time, effort, and energy that they've poured into you in vain. Make sure you're using it to the best of your ability, right? So if somebody's taking the time, Gooch, to sit down with you, oops, I'm sorry, I was supposed to call you Kevin, huh?
I
To
know you're
sit
fine.
down with you, walk you through something, right? Ask them at the end, well, how can I help you? What is something that's important to them? If mentoring is important to your mentor, maybe you should mentor somebody younger than you, right? If tutoring is important, maybe you should go tutor, right? Or if working with the elderly, how can you reciprocate a bit? That's part one. And be thoughtful and mindful about the time that you request of your sponsor and mentor, right? Sponsors and mentors, because it's important. I do mentor a number of young people, but I don't look at mentorship as this kind of formal. I have this one young lady I talk to every day at 2 o'clock. That works for some people. It works for many people. for me, it's if I have a young person that is thinking about this, or this a woman who's in one of our Canes community at University of Miami, her son happened to work at a big Wall Street investment bank, and he needed some assistance as he was pondering leaving the firm and going to work at a private equity firm. But he wasn't leaving because he felt like, I'm ready for this next leap and I'm passionate about this over here. He was leaving because he felt he was being treated unfairly. And I said, well, what are you doing? Right? Change the narrative. Change the narrative. Stay there, finish out that program, and be able to write your ticket wherever you want to go. Don't be in a position where you're being forced out, because then you're not going to be able to extract as much as you should be able to extract from that opportunity, right? So that's not a formal mentorship program, but that's kind of that guidance and help that I would have wanted somebody to tell me on the other end of that. Right? He asked for the assistance via his mother, but by the same token, he's now reached out to me 3 or 4 times as appropriate when he's like, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think about this? Or there's this opportunity. What do you know about it? And I give him my advice. That's a mentor. I'm not a sponsor there. There's some other people where absolutely, there's a sponsorship relationship where we've had a ongoing relationship. I know how they work. I know what they produce. I know what the opportunities are with them for growth internally and what skill sets they bring to the table, where I can say, hey, I know so-and-so over here at this company. Let me pick up the phone and put you in a position to get this new opportunity. So again, very different. But one thing that's for sure is you should still think about those relationships as much as you can in a reciprocal fashion. And even if you're a young person in high school or college and you're like, I can't do anything for Kevin Gooch, he's the man, right? Like, he doesn't need me for anything. Gooch could probably tell you something that he would need from you. Or probably like me, Gooch would say, all I'm asking you to do is in the same way I've helped you, you help the next one and the next one and the next one. I'm sorry, I'm speaking for you, but I think I know you well enough to put you in the same boat as me. But that's how I look at the world.
No, you're right. You're right. And to your point, you can't know how you can help your mentor without going back to a prior point, knowing your audience, doing the preparation, and being willing to listen. You have to be willing to listen, so you can hear how you can help. I have a story of my mentor and sponsor, which were one and the same at Alston and Bird. He was looking for a gift for his wife for their 10th wedding anniversary, and he wanted to buy her a Jeep Wrangler. And he had these very specific requirements of what he wanted to get her. And so he was going to these dealerships because he wasn't the most tech savvy person. And so I literally just went online and did a search, and I found the exact vehicle that he wanted. And it was like $6,000 cheaper than what he was looking at. And so it took me 10 minutes to do this, but that was a way to sort of repay him for all of the investment that he had made in me. And it was simple, didn't take much. And he ended up going out there and dragged me along with him to go buy it. And it was a fun experience, but that was the least that I could do to help him for all that he had done for me. So it's just a matter of being willing to listen and get to know that person, and just thinking of ways that you can return the favor or help them, and just sort of adding value yourself to the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, we often leverage these mentoring relationships when we're going through like difficult times, or to help us overcome some obstacles. In your journey, what are a couple of the obstacles that you had to overcome? And were there any that were in your way solely by the virtue of you being a woman in this sector that you're in?
Ooh, that's interesting. Not only am I a woman, I'm a Black woman, and I'm semi-young, right? I'm still a little young. My husband says I'm still young, so I'm still young. But there are some interesting obstacles, right? You don't see many people, which I'm trying to change, by the way. I don't like being the only, right? That's not cute in this particular case, right? It's interesting. I've been in meetings where people thought I was there and working for the guy that was next to me when I was the boss. And I could be like, well, don't you know I'm the boss? Like, I'm the one making these decisions. Instead, I kind of sit back and then when they realize who I am, it's like, oh, then they feel bad, right? And then then the whole conversation changes, right? So those are some interesting obstacles, right? It's some of those microaggressions that people always talk about, that you're hearing more and more about, kind of with the Black Lives Matter movement, that needed to come out. But most of my obstacles, and many of which are still, you heard me talk about the Allstate transaction, the biggest obstacle is getting the opportunity, right? And so sometimes you have to create your own lane, and sometimes you have to work to change the narrative to be able to get the opportunity. And other times you just got to make the ask, right? So if you don't think big enough, right, you're going to always be small. We could have very well been in a situation with, XYZ company or city or municipality that we were trying to work for, and say, hey, we're just glad to get that, $50,000 check, right? No, we can do the big work. And we deserve that. And help me to help you, right? I want to earn it, but sometimes you have to make the ask in order to get. And so that's been kind of the biggest obstacle, is kind of these big, hairy, audacious dreams that, you have to have in order to succeed. Because if they're going to scale you back anyway, you want to make sure that that you're scaled back to what you actually really want. It's sort of like when you negotiate on a house, right? Like the seller wants this price, you want to pay this price, and so you guys got to meet in the middle. So it's really kind of thinking through that, and not allowing people to make you think or feel that being young, Black, or a woman is a negative. It's my secret weapon. That's who they remember when we're in the room right now. If I'm in a room of 1,000 men in a fixed income convention, and I stand up and ask a question, when I then decide I want to go talk to the speaker, they're going to remember who I was in that whole room, right? But like I said, that's got to change.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about just sort of leadership and leadership styles and stuff. Like, I truly believe that leadership is the willingness to fail publicly. And, it's risky business. And as a serial leader myself, some may think I'm crazy, but what motivates you to deal with the daily grind of being a leader and sort of being that tip of the spear out in the forefront of an organization like yours?
Well, you asked what motivates me. If I don't leave this world better than I found it, I've not only failed myself, I've failed every single person that has poured their effort or energy into me. And that's from my mother and father, through my husband, to the doorman at my building that makes sure I stayed safe living in Chicago. Every single person that has done something to help me to succeed. If I fail on that dream, if I don't leave this world in a better place, it was all for naught. So that's honestly what motivates me as a leader. And to me, you have to have something bigger than yourself, because if it's just for self, and you're not going to hear me say often, Kevin, like things that are kind of finite. You can live in a gray here, you can get a dibble dabble over here, but this is finite. If it's just about you, you're not going to win. Unless your dreams are pretty small, you can probably still win. But if you're trying to do some big stuff, there's got to be something bigger than yourself that's driving it. And so when I think about, I have a 6-month-old at home that fortunately my husband last night has gotten to sleep through the night. Thank you, Jesus. But when I think about a week ago, when I have 2 hours of sleep at night and I have to still get up and take my 3-year-old to Montessori, and I have to make sure that the 2-year-old's eating, and then I have to be ready and prepared for that 9 a.m. phone call, I can complain. I do sometimes. I'm not gonna sit here and act like I don't. But I remember, right? If I don't show up, right, my team's not gonna show up. If my team doesn't show up, we fail on behalf of our clients. If our clients fail, the world fails. Yeah, it sounds crazy, right? But it's true. And so I got to show up, and it starts with me. It starts with me. And I don't have the option. If I want the option, I can go do something else. But right now I don't have the option.
So that's a good point. How would you characterize sort of your style of leadership, right? You have servant leaders, you have focused leaders, you have empathetic leaders. Like what is sort of your way of leading your team and your organization?
You know, it's evolved over time, I think, and that's okay. Leadership styles should evolve, and you don't necessarily have to be. And I'll use the chameleon term. Being a chameleon is not a negative necessarily, right? Different teams require different things. Different people within my organization require different things. But what I can tell you is core to who I am. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to be clear. I'm going to be focused, and I care. Right? So even if I am having a difficult conversation with someone, what I would not want them, they might say, oh, Kourtney was harsh on this, Kourtney. What at the end of the day, if someone says, but was it about her or does she care about whether your kids eat or not? Right? That's important to me. So I try to do everything from a place of, you may not like what I'm saying. I'm going to work on how I say it. That's one of my growth moments, right? You may not like what I say. I'm going to work on how I say it, but I need you to do it because it's for the benefit of all of us. And if your people believe that the direction that they're receiving, that there is a direct impact to them and the things they care about, I personally think that's how you can get the best out of people. So I'm working every day on kind of that leadership style, if you will, the humility, the self-confidence while still being humble, right? The being able to say things to make people want to do things for you versus feeling like they have to do things. And so, you know, it's an ever-going process. We all have to still grow, Gooch. We all have to grow.
I love it. And I like to say leadership is a journey, right? It's not a destination because you're always growing and evolving. For me personally, being the youngest leader of the 100 with the organization full of seasoned saints, I had to evolve my leadership style as well because I show up trying to be a trailblazer and just sort of focused and pushing. And I had to learn to sort of listen more and take other folks into account more while still sort of being a servant leader. And so it's okay to sort of evolve as you go along the way, and just want to make sure young people understand that, again, you got to know your audience, and your audience can help you determine the best style to get the results that you need. But you got to always know who you're leading and know your audience, because one message for person A may not be the same message that resonates with person B, and it's on you to figure that out.
But that's called emotional intelligence, right? And so a really good leader has good emotional intelligence, right? They're passionate about what they're doing, but they can also read the people that are around them. And like I said, people tell you sometimes, but you got to be able to listen, like you said. And you have to be flexible, right? Right, Gooch? Like you said, like you might have wanted to come in there and do X, Y, or Z, but in order to get done what you needed to get done, you had to give a little bit, right? It didn't take away from your authentic self or any of that stuff, all these new wonderful buzzwords, but you had to adjust and adapt to get to your end goal. And that's a sign of a really, really good leader. You have a vision of where you want to go, but you're flexible to a certain extent on how you get there. And you also have to have the courage, right? You got to be courageous. You got to be courageous. And so you could have been scared stepping into your seat. You could have not have, oh, I'm not ready for that yet, right? Instead, you were like, I got this. And I'm going to be as prepared as I can be to take care of it. So I think, you know, it's an awesome position to be to be in. And I'm sure just as a lot of people were helping to lift me up and carry me up, the same was happening for you.
Mm-hmm. When did you know you were a leader? When did you know you were cut out to lead, right? Some people they get anxiety. They don't want to be out front. They're afraid that they might fail. When did you know that you were sort of cut out to be a leader? When were you thrust into that leadership space?
So I'm the big sister, Gooch. I have a little sister who I love, right? And I think it was at I can't tell you the moment or the day, but it's one of those things where I knew she watched me. And even though she didn't articulate it, and I'll tell you what she said to me now, call it 30 plus years later, but she was always watching me. She would always, like, when someone would ask a question, she would look over at me to answer it for her, right? Um, and I took it seriously. And in 2020 hindsight, clearly at 8 and 9 years old, I don't really know the impact of having, this other person looking up to you, what it really meant, but I knew it meant something. And I knew I did not want to fail her. And I knew if I did things that she would look at me and say, well, Kourtney did it or didn't do it, right? And so that was important. And 30 call it years later, and I didn't hear this until after the fact, but when you get married, how sometimes you do a video and do the videography. I know we're working on you, Gooch. We're gonna get you there too. But in our video for our wedding, my sister basically talked about how she looked up to me, right? She never had said that to me before. And here it was 2016, right? And it's like, she did. So all was not in vain. But that's when I knew, that's kind of the first sign of leadership for me personally, was at that, leading her to the best of my ability. You can't control everything, but setting the stage and planting good seeds is kind of where my leadership started. And then from a professional perspective, to actually having to lead a team, I was really thrust into it. As I say, I was baptized by fire. We had a situation where a whole team had walked out of our firm in the middle of a trading day. And because I supported the senior people, I was then one who knew the clients. So I didn't know how to lead. I mean, there are places where you can go and do leadership training and go talk to McKinsey Consulting and do all this. I didn't have any of that. I'm trying to, again, as I fix things around the edges, I'm working on that. I'm reading books and I'm going to different places. But, at that time, it was all I knew was, I got to make sure the client's happy. I got to make sure the rest of this team doesn't leave. I got to make sure we have the skills and the resources that we need to support them. And I said, all you're going to know from me is you're going to get my authentic self. You're going to know that I care, and I'm going to work just as hard as you are to make sure that we succeed. So if you want to say that was the leadership style and how it kind of came about, it probably was. There are a lot, fancier and more thoughtful ways to go about getting to leadership, but that's how I kind of came into mine. And like I said, and over time, just continuing to read and grow, doing an executive management program helped at Northwestern. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. 2020 hindsight on things I can change. Of course, I'm my own biggest critic, but I would say, given the time, you get better at it if that's what you want to do.
And I'd say it's going pretty darn well.
Working on.
Speaking of that, what are 2 or 3 of your major accomplishments? And then on the flip side, 2 or 3 things that you've done differently.
Nope, Gooch. Can't talk about me on that aspect. Nope. Because I'll give you one of those answers of, my biggest accomplishments probably don't have much to do with work.
Okay.
Right? They don't. It's, you talked about mentorship. I was 18, 19 in college down at Miami, and I was tutoring a young woman who I adore to this day. I still think of her as being 9 years old, but she's in her 20s now. But she came from a situation that one would have probably said the odds were stacked against her. Having her go to and complete college and be working and getting ready to go to dental school, that's one of my biggest accomplishments, right? Again, when you think about the impact that I want to have on this world, the only way I can have that impact is by that next and that next and that next being better than I could ever imagine. So, that's a big accomplishment. My little minis, they're my accomplishment, the biggest. So yeah, I'm not going to give you the corporate answer on it, because that, again, it's what drives me. It's what's great. I'm proud of the things that I've done professionally, because it allows, other girls, women, boys that look like me to say they can. I'm proud of that.
I definitely admire some of the philanthropic stuff. So I know about some of that, and I appreciate that. The flip side of that question is designed, right? Because if you have some failures or opportunities for growth, how you navigate that, I think, is beneficial for younger leaders or folks that are beginning their leadership journey. So, what are your thoughts on that? Like some of those opportunities for growth and how you deal with those?
So one thing that I've actually had to learn, I learned later, and I might have learned it later because of the situation I was in, right? So I grew up in an entrepreneurial environment. I was the eighth person at a firm that started with six, and we're a couple hundred now. And I've worked at one firm for all of my post collegiate career, right? So I grew up in an environment where I always thought that, if you work hard, you don't have to kind of manage up, if you will, right? And a lot of people learn this much earlier. And if I could teach a class on it, I would say just as important as it is to learn and to teach people how to manage subordinates or people that work for you, it's just as important to learn how to manage up. So, Kevin, when you talk about knowing your audience, knowing their risk tolerance, knowing what drives them, knowing the things that set them off, it's important to understand the people that sign your check. And even if you're the check signer, managing up would be managing to your clients then, right? But understanding where you're trying to go and how certain people in that chain impact your success or lack thereof is critical. I kind of skirted the question, but not so much. But one of my biggest learning lessons was learning how to manage up.
Mm. If you have someone that's underperforming, how do you manage squeeze the best out of them? What are your approaches to do that?
It's hard. It's sort of like the difficult people kind of thing too, right? So you have to learn. You have to learn people. I always tell people, even if you're, I don't care what you're majoring in, if you're majoring in aerospace, you don't necessarily need this, but if you can do a minor in psychology, I recommend it for people. Because no matter if you're working with computers or you're a lawyer or you're a doctor, there is a person at some point that you're going to have to communicate with. And it's more than just communication skills. It's the analysis of psyche. So that's one thing, again, as I continue to grow and learn, that I'm going to continue to work on. But when you're talking about a difficult person or an underperformer, understand where they're coming from. Listen, right? That listening skill, that 2 ears, 1 mouth is still in play. Understand what's causing them to underperform. And then you have to evaluate whether you have the ability to help them to get to where you want them to be, right? Yes, they have to want to be there, but do you as the leader or the manager have the capacity to help to get them there? Because it takes some effort and time too. And if you don't want to invest in that person, they're never going to be successful. Even if they have the aptitude and the willpower, if you're not in a position to help them to succeed, they won't. So when you think about underperformers, it's what is the obstacle that's causing them to underperform, and how can you help to maneuver that out of the way? And the how can you help starts with, do you want to help? So there are some places and some people where, you think about kind of this internal locus of control and kind of all of that and taking responsibility. A lot of it does start with the leadership and the manager, right? And whether or not you can actually help to move the needle. That's critical. And, with difficult people, that's another one, right? They're probably even more so than underperformers, right? Because you can get some high performing people that are just difficult to deal with. But there's certain things certain threads that kind of go through them as well. First of all, you got to stay calm. Right. I'm working on that. And my husband's a difficult person. Stay calm. It's really kind of understanding that person, what their intentions are. So again, it becomes a therapist session. I got a couch in my office for a reason, because sometimes it just goes beyond whether or not somebody can actually do the job. It's, do they have 5 kids at home that they're training or teaching virtually? Did one of their parents pass away? You don't know what's going on in someone's life, and you can't just say check it all at the door. That's an easy response. But if you want someone in your organization for the long term, you have to understand them. You have to understand what drives them, and you have to understand their blind spots in order to put your arms around them, be able to help with that blind spot, to be able to help the organization to get to the objectives that they're trying to achieve.
Good stuff. Good stuff. If you had a college student that came to you and asked you your advice on leadership, what advice would you give a college student on beginning to lead?
Kevin, I don't know if it deviates that much, right? That self-confidence, that humility, being honest and authentic, right? Being hard working. Nobody likes a slouch, right? No, nobody likes a slouch, right? There are certain people who will pretend, like, even when you see like I'll just use my favorite rapper, who's probably your favorite rapper's favorite rapper, Jay-Z. When you generally see him, he's real laid back, he's nonchalant, but he's always thinking. He's always working. You look at the work ethic of great individuals, they may come across, again, as laid back and calm, which is great. It's a sign of a fantastic leader. Those are the people that scare me the most, honestly. If you know they've run a successful business, one of the boards I sit on, Market Access, the CEO is this guy, Rick McVeigh. And when you talk to Rick, generally, he's laid back, he's smiling, he's walking through things, but I know he is die hard focused all the time. So keeping that focus, being humble, being confident, and continue to learn, continue to grow, and learn from everyone around you. The Starbucks barista has something to teach you. It's up to you to learn that from them.
You just mentioned one of your board positions, and we know you're added to the board of Lululemon. We know that African Americans are few and far between on corporate boards. And you've joined the board of this revolutionary company that's revolutionizing fitness. What was that experience like?
It was scary. It was awesome. But the chair of the board, it's, I don't know if this is the humility that comes out of me, but when I got the call from the recruiter and we were talking through it, and they said, hey, we want to move you to the next round. And I met with the chairman, and, I'm trying to sell him on me because I was super excited. I was like, wait a minute, I finally get to do retail and sit on the board and help to drive one of the most incredible growth stories that's out there in retail that's winning. So I'm trying to get my A game on. I'm like, okay, let me be ready. Let me do this. And he's like, look, this isn't an interview. We want you. That's a real good position to be in, right? When you have someone that says, we want you, how can I convince you to bring your skills, Kourtney, and expertise to our company? That puts you in a very different place. And again, I was still so incredibly humbled by it. But again, just like with Market Access, which was my first board, a client of mine who's a fellow board member, he said to me when he retired about a year ago, he said, Kourtney, I'm going to find another way for us to work together. I want to work with you again. And I was like, oh, okay, I want to work with you too. And I'm not thinking much of it. I meant it. And I stayed in touch with him. But he was a sponsor for me. He went into that boardroom, again, S&P 500 company, market leading fintech growth company. And he said, this is who we need. She is who we need. He made the case. And so again, when I then went to meet with the nominating and governance committee, and I met with the chair of the board, et cetera, it was really them trying to explain why I should want a seat on their board. And I'm like, that's just awesome. Those are the kinds of people you want to partner with. I had my first board meeting yesterday with the Lulu team. And just like my Market Access board, I'm so humbled because I am able to work with some great people. the ideas, the focus, the talent. Oh my God. Loop is about to go here too. I mean, Loop 3.0 is coming out of this, right? It just help with the more great people you're around, the greater you can be if you're smart, right? And I think there's like some quote, and I hate to use one of these catchy phrases because I know we have to go, but if you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room. Mm. And I'm not the smartest one in the room, but I'm trying to suck up every bit of energy to make sure that I'm soaking it all in to be smarter than I was the day before. So.
Well, you convinced me to buy a mirror, so just because of you. But I
all
have.
Right, well, make sure you let them know and go get your Lulu pants. We can go by Linux or Perimeter. I'll go with you, Kev. I mean, just get me to shop. I mean, I swear I'm going to spend my whole next paycheck at Lulu, but let's do it.
Do you have time for 2 quick questions?
Sure.
So the first one is sort of 2-part. It's like, what do you tell a college student that wants to be Kourtney Gibson? And what do you want your legacy to be? And then we have a question about networking from the audience.
Someone who wants to be like me, mm-hmm. I would say, dream bigger. Dream bigger. Let me help you to learn my dream. And that's what I want you to seek to be.
And then level up.
Level up. Level up. And 2, I want my legacy to be what I started off with, that, hey, she left this place better than she found it. I have to do that. That's what I need my legacy to be. Where you look up at CNBC, and I used to be the only one. I just told the talent producer, I said, go on my LinkedIn page. I said, go find if you want some more diversity on here, go see who's exciting to you in my Rolodex and let me introduce you. I have clients like the Eugene Prophets and John Rogers and others. I'm like, hey guys, let's go on here. We need little baby Kevin Gooches looking up here and seeing someone that looks like them talking about stocks and talking about bonds and the markets and finance, right? Because they say if you can see it, you can be it. But I would even venture to say, even if you don't see it, make sure that the next time we do see it. So that's it.
Then the last question is, how do you network? How have you leveraged networking to get those sponsors and those mentors? Like, what is your strategy for networking?
So I'm not a serial networker. I try to let my work represent for me, right? Mm-hmm. If you're one of these people that constantly is like, oh, I'm going to go out and the second I meet you, it's like, oh, what do you do? And I like hesitate. I'm like, well, I work for an investment bank. I do sales. I'm very cautious about that, because anyone who is probably in a position to help you doesn't want the first thing that you do is to try to say, what can you do for me? Mm-hmm. Right. So as a part of my networking, if you will, what I try to do first is do something for someone else. And then I try to call in that favor. So now I'm giving you guys my tips. I do something, so Gooch, be ready because it's coming. But I try to do something first in that way, and then I'll come back and say, hey, would you mind helping me on this, right? So it's rooted in gratitude, and hopefully people return the favor. But you do have to get out. You have to be present. But the number one thing as a young person within, whether it's your college, whether it's your first job, be the first one there, the last one to leave. If your boss is there, there's work to be done, which means there's work for you to be done. And do what people expect you to do, and do what you say you're going to do. You got to be a person of your word, and the rest of it kind of comes to be. Put yourself in the room where you can learn from those around you. If you want to go into being a technologist, find out what conferences are out there. Find out what the big tech things are. Be in those rooms and listen, bump shoulders, but don't be so intentional about it that it's not authentic. So that's all I got for you, Gooch.
Well, this has been great, phenomenal. We can wrap up now. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate you very much. And I think the folks listening have gained something from this, and I think our college students, our young professionals will definitely gain something from this. So thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, I appreciate you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.